This is an unusual situation. We're here in an art museum about to discuss an art exhibition and perhaps art in general, and there are 4 philosophers have been introduced here and 1 artist. Certainly not the standard lineup for discussing art, and that really reflects the unusual nature of this exhibition and of the whole project. The exhibition and the book that was published to go along with it. The curatorial team, which Gunnar mentioned, consisted of 8 people, all of them philosophers, and 7 of those have essays in the book. The idea for this exhibition was really born, I suppose. The idea came from Hafþór Ingvason, the curator of the museum, and who is director of the museum, who is also a philosopher, as well as an art historian. And after living abroad for many years, he came home to take over this post, and he noticed, and was surprised to notice, that among those actively writing about art in Iceland, there were a number of philosophers, in fact, oddly many. And so he decided to take the opportunity to create an exhibition that would somehow harness this engagement or harness the potential of this group and the encounter between art and philosophy. The exhibition is certainly an unusual one, also in terms of the selection of artworks. It is usually when one comes to a collective exhibition of this type, there is a clear theme. There is something that obviously connects the artworks in the exhibition, whether it's a common medium shared by the artist or a common subject or something like that. In this case, the connecting thread is perhaps elusive. When we started our discussions in preparation for this exhibition, the idea was to focus on works that, to begin with, we simply called self-reflective or self-reflexive works, artworks that say something about themselves, that artworks that somehow express an opinion, really, on how they should be viewed, on what makes them art, or how we should really think about them and approach them. This, of course, is a fairly common tendency in contemporary art, but it is certainly unusual and a bit risky to pull together a whole exhibition based only on this similarity in the artworks. Whether we have succeeded in creating an interesting exhibition is not for me to say, certainly, but so anyhow, this event, the lecture yesterday by Nicholas Borjo and today's discussions, are part of an experiment to explore the frontiers of art and philosophy. The experiment also includes the current exhibition here in the Reykjavik Art Museum, and the book of essays I mentioned, published as a catalogue, and the full year we spent in discussion to prepare the book and the exhibition. The exhibition is certainly an unusual one, although we have received kind reviews, and it may be a bit difficult to take in. Reading the book may or may not help. And as Gunnar Harðarson writes at the beginning of his chapter in the book, it is not immediately obvious that art and philosophy have anything at all in common. And when I was preparing this short introduction, I thought of a very recent work by the artist Sigurður Guðmundsson, who also has 2 pieces in this exhibition. But just last spring he made a new work, a photograph, called Icelandic Carpenters and Dead Philosophers, which shows about a dozen of Icelandic carpenters holding pictures of dead philosophers, Descartes, Plato, Derrida, etc. This exhibition here runs the risk of seeming as mismatched as the pairing of carpenters and dead philosophers in Sigurður's photograph. The project reflects the fact, as I mentioned, that so many of those who have written about Icelandic arts in the last decades have a background in philosophy. The experiment, then, involves much more than this book and the exhibition. It reflects a long period of engagement, hundreds of essays, articles, and books, discussions, lectures, and exhibitions. In that sense, we are not really attempting to do something new here. The connection had already been made, and perhaps it would be better to think of the exhibition as a retrospective, weaving together the different strands of thought that have informed this long engagement. As Oddný Eir explains in her chapter of the book, such engagements are always personal as much as they are theoretical. They also involve a degree of risk, both for the philosophers and for the artists who engage with them. On the traditional model, these fields should be kept strictly separate. Philosophers might muse on the general conditions and implications of art, and artists might find inspiration in philosophical writings, just as they do in just about anything else that comes their way. We, the group of philosophers organizing the exhibition, have, in a sense, stepped outside our given roles or taken on new ones. We have all of us worked as, some of us worked as art critics, most of us have at one point or another taught courses on art history, something we are, strictly speaking, not at all qualified to do, and we have curated exhibitions. We have probably all had the uncomfortable experience of being referred to in public and in print as art historians. This is uncomfortable not because we don't value the pursuit of art history, but because it feels like an impersonation, as though we were usurping powers that do not belong to us by right. Whether this is so is, of course, one of the central questions raised by this exhibition and by the project as a whole. Perhaps all this is just a sign of the times, a reflection of the cross-disciplinary, cross-cultural period of history we live in. If we are to be blamed for overstepping our given function, then what about the artists themselves? In the last century, and especially and increasingly in the last few decades, the sphere of artistic production has expanded to include just about every facet of material and cultural life. There are resident artists at NASA now. The Icelandic pavilion at the Venice Biennale this year is dedicated to the discussion of nationhood and nationality, a socio-political issue, not an aesthetic one, at least on the face of it. It has become impossible to map the role and reach of the artist in contemporary culture. It has become quite impossible to provide a coherent definition of art or its purpose. When we talk about art, we have, strictly speaking, no idea what we're talking about. It is certainly not the purpose of this exhibition to provide such a definition. The exhibition is not intended to illustrate an idea or serve as proof for an argument. The central idea was to bring together works of art that raise philosophical questions, not resolve them. If it is possible to name any common thread of thought in the curatorial decisions made here, it is probably our common conviction that art can provide as cogent a commentary on philosophical issues as any academic argument or text. Perhaps then, it is not us who have overstepped our authority, but the artists. It's all a question of perspective. Like any philosophical project, this one grew out of a sense of wonder, a fascination with the way art has developed in our time, and with the possibilities it offers for raising and addressing pressing questions that remain unanswered despite all our theorizing. Perhaps there is also a degree of envy involved. While philosophers seem doomed to toil for years, decades, even centuries, at phrasing and polishing even rather obvious questions with little hope of finding an answer, the artists whose work we see here in the exhibition seem able to do this almost without effort, and in such a way that the thinking is clear to anyone who comes along. It shouldn't surprise us, therefore, that there is more of a market for art these days than for philosophical texts. This involves another level of risk, as there is every reason to think that the audience will find the art much more interesting than our philosophical commentaries. Such risks, however, are inherent in any philosophical enterprise, and in all artistic ones as well. The exhibition is, as much as anything, intended to reflect and in some way to justify our long engagement with art and our extensive collaborations with artists. It is an acknowledgement of the fact that art can tackle issues that would once have been thought of as the more or less exclusive domain of philosophy. And it is also an attempt to make common cause with the artists in explicating them. In doing so, we also open ourselves up to new dangers. Collaborating with artists can be dangerous business. And one member of the curatorial team is missing this weekend, unable to attend our discussions. Instead, Ólafur Gíslason is in Austria at the opening of an exhibition where he is present not as a philosopher or a critic, but as one of the artworks on display. The author of the work is a young Icelandic artist, Katrín Jónsdóttir Hjördísardóttir, who had been invited to submit a work to the exhibition. Instead of sending a more conventional work or showing up herself for a performance, she decided to send a philosopher, a middle-aged philosopher. And so Ólafur is probably right now in the odd position of having to justify his presence at an art opening as a work of art. And good luck to him. So this is one of the severe dangers that philosophers open themselves up to when they collaborate with artists. They might end up as works of art. In yesterday's discussion, one of the questions raised was whether we should see the artist as a patient on the analyst's bench, waiting to be analyzed, or whether contemporary artists had in fact taken over the role of the analyst. We could easily replace the analyst in this image with a philosopher. The boundaries have been blurred, and there is no reason to think they will ever be clearly drawn again. That, perhaps, is the most important insight to be gained from this project. And I'll not say anything more at the moment, but hopefully we can take this up in the discussion. Thank you.